You're writing this long series of 15 books, The Gray Man. How do you manage the arc of the main character over 15 books?
It's my favorite part of the whole thing. I kind of like thinking about how the psychology of this character would change over time and how he would make friends and lose friends and make alliances. That's kind of the fun part of it for me. Writing action scenes is great when you're doing it and you think of something that you haven't done before or you haven't seen before. But I go into the action scenes without really mapping them out, and I just sort of let them flow. But I really like to spend a lot of time thinking about the larger story arc for the characters and where they're going through books 16 and 17.
Welcome to Make the Donuts. I'm your host, Erik Sabiston. I'm a best-selling author, a dual-rated airline pilot, and a career counselor. I've helped over 8,000 people make the jump to the airlines. Now, I'm interviewing successful people from a variety of professions around the world. It's time to learn their secrets for success. Make the Donuts starts now. And welcome back for another exciting episode where I interview my good friend Mark Greaney. This is a very prolific author. He has 20, I believe, New York Times best-selling books right now. Author of the Gray Man series. I'm sure you've seen it on Netflix. It's a fantastic movie. And he's going to join us today and tell us what it's like to be a writer, how to become a writer. Mark, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Good to see you, Erik. It's been a while.
I want to jump right into it, man. Tell our audience how you got started as a writer.
I got started as a writer by being a reader, just a voracious reader. I didn't read any real fiction until I was about 18 or 19. And the first novel I ever picked up was Patriot Games by Tom Clancy. And I read a ton of nonfiction. I was very interested in history, military, espionage, read a ton of stuff about the Second World War and the Civil War. Growing up as a kid, I was always reading. And I'd been studying the IRA in college and the Irish Republican Army, and Patriot Games was about that. And so I said, I'll pick up this novel and see if this guy knows what he's talking about, because I was a cocky, 19-year-old, and it changed my life. Read it voraciously. I didn't know you could learn things and, have that much fun doing it at the same time. And that didn't make me want to be a writer, but it just made me want to go out and read other stuff. And I just read Frederick Forsyth and Nelson DeVille and Jean Le Carré and all these guys. And a few years into that, just a couple of years into that, I got an idea. I was taking a class in international terrorism in college. And I got an idea about a story, and I started writing it. And I spent 15 years writing it. I went and got a real job. I graduated college, got a real job, but it just was always in the back of my head that I wanted to write this story. And I finished it in 2005 and immediately shelved it and went and wrote something else. And the second book I wrote in like 7 months. And that one got me in front of an agent, and he was like, "Hey, you're a good writer. But this book isn't that marketable. I bet you could do something." And that gave me, the lift to go write something else and something else. And so my fourth manuscript, my fourth completed novel was The Gray Man, which was my first published novel. So from 1990, when I first started writing those first words of that first book, to 2009 was all, aspiring to be an author. So I've been doing this a long time professionally, and I still haven't been doing it as long as I was wanting to do it. I was aspiring still more than I was successful at it.
Oh, come on. I didn't know that. So you actually wrote, manuscripts prior to. It was almost like a process of finding your voice. Who was the agent?
The agent is a guy named Scott Miller, who sadly just passed away last month. But he was the first agent that I ever spoke to. I sought him out because he was the agent of a guy named Ralph Peters, who was a military thriller author who I thought was criminally underappreciated. I thought he was fantastic. And I thought, okay, if this guy represents Ralph Peters, maybe he would represent the type of book that I would like to write. So I saw, I looked him up on the internet, and this would have been 2006. And I saw that he was going to be speaking at a conference, and I went to the conference just to see him. And it took a few years before he agreed to represent me, and he was right. he told me what he didn't, what he liked and what he didn't like, and it took a couple of years for him to agree to represent me. But he found me a publisher, and he remained my agent until he passed away a couple months ago.
I got an opportunity to speak to Scott, and he gave me some good advice. He didn't end up representing me either,
Yeah.
but he's a legend in publishing.
Yeah.
Everyone he
Yeah.
knows who he is, and his passing was terrible. But
Yeah.
kudos to you. You had the guts to go up to somebody like that and approach them like that.
Yeah, I will say I barely had the guts. I mean, the true story is you had to pay to speak to the agents, and the writers conference gets the money. Like the agent doesn't get paid to read your submission. But I signed up to speak to 3 agents because I was like, I'm going all the way to this thing. I had really, really bad social anxiety. And I didn't even leave my hotel room for the first 2 meetings. And the third one was Scott. And I'm like, this is the guy you came out here. And I'm just pacing my hotel room going like, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. And I went there and I, as soon as, he shook my hand, he's like, oh, you're the guy I've been waiting to meet. And he's like, this is the best thing that's ever been handed to me at a writer's conference. And he goes, that's not saying a lot, but that's still, it's really good. So he was just very, just super down to earth guy. And so I'd built, literary agents up in my head to be this, they had what I wanted, so I built them up in my head as this, like these gurus on the top of a mountain. And I was, so far beneath them. And he wasn't like that at all. He was just like, we were chatting about other authors and, we just, very disarmed by the fact that he was just this cool laid back guy. And then even while the couple of years before he would represent me, every now and then I'd get a call from New York, and it would be this well-known literary agent going like, hey man, how's it going? What are you working on? Send it to me when you're ready and all that kind of stuff. So he was just that type of guy. And it's a big loss for the industry, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. But I want to talk about the process prior to this. I mean, so many people don't understand what it takes to be a writer. You clearly had the ability to create this, massive volume of ideas and thoughts that were, ended up becoming manuscripts for yourself. Where did that come from? You said you'd read a lot, but is that something that you picked up as far as the mechanics in college? And a follow-on question, is college necessary to be a great writer?
Well, I didn't ever study writing at all in college. I was not that good in English, and I've gone to speak to dozens of high schools, even in other countries. And I always say that, and then immediately go, and that hurts me every day. I wish I was really good in English. I've had arguments with people about why this sentence doesn't work. And it's like, oh my gosh, I remember something in 7th grade, but I just don't remember the words, And so like, it really would have benefited me if I did pay attention in class. But, I think the creativity, I think it's sort of either there or not there. You can definitely develop it if anything's there. But I had this thing that was not diagnosed at the time, but I know what it is now. They call it maladaptive daydreaming. You just sort of, when I was a kid, I was just such a daydreamer and lost in my own head and had imaginary friends and all that kind of stuff. And, that's nothing but a negative at that point of your life. And then somehow it in your 40s, you turn that into a career. But I would just do all this reading. And then I would think, well, what if this, what if that? And I remember for that first manuscript I started writing, I was going like, oh, I thought it would be so cool if somebody wrote a book about this thing. And then I was like, well, I mean, maybe you should try to write it. And the mechanics for writing, I think you could definitely learn a lot from going to college. In fact, I've taught day-long writers classes, like master classes for people that are aspiring authors. And they'll send me their first 5 pages or whatever, and they'll give me a couple months to go through everybody's submission, and then we'll meet for a day in New York. And I've done it twice, and it's super fulfilling for me. Like it takes a lot of time, and I'm always busy, and I'm always late with whatever book I'm working on. But I love to just look at somebody's work and go like, bam, you're making a huge mistake here that you could fix in 2 seconds, and it would totally change the way that you write. It's like if you just look at it this way. And so like, I kind of like that nitty gritty mechanic stuff. And I would literally look at somebody's work and go like, dude, shorter paragraphs, every, unique thought, if it's on its own paragraph, this entire page will read so much different. And it'll mechanically read faster, and it'll give the reader this sense of urgency that right now you don't have. And so like, there are like a million little I mean, just dirty little tricks about writing that I think you can learn. But as far as the creativity, I've had so many people tell me, because it took me, most of 20 years to get published, like, oh my gosh, you're so resilient and you just never gave up and blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of think about it and I go, I would take credit for that if I believed that. But honestly, I liked to write and it didn't feel like work. I mean, I remember there was definitely a time in my late 30s where it's like, very frustrating that I hadn't been published, but still it was like, I kind of felt compelled to do it. So, people, ask for me for writing advice. I'm like, well, are you writing? Because if you're not writing, there's no advice I can give you to make it better or to get published. So you really kind of have to want to do it. And if it feels like work, if it felt like work for me for 20 years, if I would do my day job and then come home and do my night job or whatever, I would not have stuck with it. So it didn't feel like resilience. It felt like it was just this thing that I did. And, slowly over time, I got good enough to where it could go into the marketplace, I guess.
That's amazing. And I want to remind you of something we talked about a long time ago. We were talking about Red Storm Rising.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite books of all time.
Best.
And I said, man, I wish there was a modern day Red Storm Rising. And true to your nature, you told me and you said, well, why don't you write it? And I'm like, I'm not a writer. I'm a pilot. I'm just spewing out what I remembered. And then Red Metal. I mean, come on, man. That to me is the epitome of what I would write if I could write. Like if I had that creative thing where you're like, I can't help it. I'm always thinking, that's like a gift. You have a gift. So like if I had it, that is like the epitome of a modern story like that. That's such a great book, man.
I appreciate it. I'm super proud of that book. The story of Red Metal, which came out in 2019, is I was writing Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan books, and this was after Tom had passed away. And I was up at the Pentagon, and I'd gotten an email from a guy, and he's like, hey, if you're ever up at the Pentagon, I was going up there in literally 5 days or something to do some research. He's like, if you're ever up in D.C., I work at the Pentagon. I'm a Marine Lieutenant Colonel, and I'd love to be a writer, and I love your books or whatever. And I was like, well, coincidentally, I'm going to be there like next week or something. So I met this guy. We got along like really, really well. We didn't talk about writing a book together. He wanted to be an author, and I just, over lunch at the Pentagon was just talking about the career and the life and all that. But we stayed friends, and he got transferred out to Camp Pendleton, and I was in California, and I visited with him, and I became friends with his wife, and then he would always talk about what he wanted to work on, and I would always go, well, what about this? And then we would just kind of build stuff via text messages, emails, and in person, talking on the phone to each other. And there was this one morning, just out of the blue, it just hit me. And I just texted him. I was like, hey, if you want to write a book together, I know I can get us a book deal. And so, the phone rings like 2 seconds later, what? And we met in Las Vegas. We were both in Vegas. And so over the next 6 months, we wrote a 91 chapter outline together, and I'd go up to DC or California, wherever he was. And then we did research in Poland and Germany, and he went to France, and we went out to Nellis Air Force Base, and we did all this research and wrote this book together. And it was so much fun. But like, I met him, and he had all these great ideas. And I told him, I was like, there was this one point where I told him, I was like, okay, we've got a book deal now. I'm the one that's written all the books. At some point, there's somebody that has veto power. I feel bad, but there may be a point where I, tell you I don't like something you've written, and I'm going to have to get the final say. And I just need to know if you can handle that. And he goes, Rip goes, well, Mark, I've been to war, so I think it's going to be okay. And I was like, yeah, all right, I will up, and I will never bring that up again. And he just said it very matter of factly. He's like, yeah, there's really nothing, you're not going to hurt my feelings. And but we had a great relationship. We were supposed to do another book together. I'm very excited about that.
Man, I can't wait. I'm definitely going to be reading that. When you watch Captain Dale Dye come on screen on a film, the scene instantly takes on a level of authenticity. And I was wondering if with Red Metal, if I was going to see a difference with a military guy I didn't see a difference because your stuff is very realistic. How do you get that realism? And I know that you do a lot of research, but I mean, how do you find that military realism and inject it into a way, into a book in a way where somebody like myself would be like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. There's nothing fake about what he's writing.
Yeah, for Red Metal specifically, I had a co-author who was an active duty Marine Lieutenant Colonel. I usually don't. And none of the Clancy books I had that, but I would reach out to people. I would, obviously did my own reading. My background in college was in international relations and political science, and am a huge news junkie. My dad was a journalist. He ran the NBC affiliate here in Memphis, Tennessee, where I live. So I kind of grew up around the news. And so if I didn't know something, I kind of knew where I could find out that information. And I would literally get an F-18 pilot on the phone and talk to them about, the ejection. But I mean, ultimately I ended up flying an F-18. But, earlier in my career, I would just get, I got a helicopter. Somebody I knew somebody that knew somebody who was in the 160th the Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And I got on the phone with that guy and we talked for an hour and a half about something with helicopters. And at the end of the conversation, I said, hey, listen, when the book comes out, I'm going to, obviously I'm going to put something in there about how you helped me and I'd love to send you a copy. And he's like, no, I'm good, but it's good talking to you.
Yeah. Oh, I know that type.
You meet those guys and I'm like, all right, I appreciate you just as much. So, you don't get everything right and you make mistakes and you hear from everybody that wants to tell you about those mistakes, which is fine. I do a lot of, training with firearms. So I like to get things at the very ground level down, because you've all read stuff in books or seen things in movies that just make you cringe. I like to get it I like to read stuff that I think is credible. So I like to write stuff that I think is credible. So you just doing the work is how you do it. The
Washington Post called you the Tom Cruise of thriller action authors. You're not like a lot of authors. I mean, you're outgoing into shoot houses. You're diving. You're flying in F-18s. I mean, how does that inform your writing? Because you didn't have that kind of access when you were starting out.
No, I didn't. Honestly, the only access I had, my first, say, 3 books before Tom Clancy, the only access I had was there was a firearms school here in Tennessee, sort of in Middle Tennessee, that I was spending a lot of time at. And I was one of the few sort of just civilians there. Most everybody else was either law enforcement or military. And I mean, I literally would just taking a sort of a basic handgun class, or maybe not basic, but some kind of just a handgun class. And one of the guys there was there with his son, who was like 16 years old, taking the same class. And the guy's like, oh yeah, I fly drones at Creech Air Force Base. And I'm like, oh wow, cool. And so make friends that way, or make friends with some guy who's federal SWAT, like a HRT guy, or they would know somebody. So the best part about doing the research on guns was being in the team house, in the team rooms and the bunk houses and stuff like that, and meeting people and developing your access. And then when I started working with Clancy, it was a whole different thing. The first 3 books I did, Tom was still alive. And the first one that I worked on was called Locked On, and it was in 2011. And the deal was I was helping Tom Clancy write a Jack Ryan book, but I was not allowed to tell anybody that that's what I was doing until the book was finished, because they wanted to make sure it was good enough. And so I was going to the Pentagon, and I'd put out 2 little paperback novels at that time. And I was going like, every one of these doors would open so fast if I just said, hey, by the way, I'm writing, I've got Tom Clancy on, I'm going to be talking to Tom Clancy later about what I've learned today. But I couldn't do it for that whole year of 2011. And it was the most frustrating thing in the world. And then once my name was on a Jack Ryan book, then things got a lot easier.
Oh yeah, I bet it did. I mean, that's a part of American culture, the Jack Ryan novels. I mean, they just go, I mean, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
So now that you're writing, obviously you're writing the Green Man series, and this is a very well-known character. I've got to ask you something. How do you come up with ideas for a story?
It's different all the time. There's not one way. There's not a point in the year where I go, okay, next year's book, let me get a sheet of paper and sort of map it out. I would just kind of have thoughts in my head that I develop. So I wanted to learn about weaponized artificial intelligence. So I wrote a book called The Chaos Agent. And so I was committed to writing that book because, you sort of have to tell your agent what you're going to work on for next year and well in advance of writing it. So, I wanted to, I was fascinated by AI and, robotic warfare. And I see that leaps and bounds in Ukraine with drones specifically, but also on the ground with robots and things that are being developed in China. And so I came up with an idea for a story about how my hero, intersects with that world. And then, that's where that story's going. Now I've got to make something happen. And then you do the research. So it's just different every year. I've always had an idea about, or not always, but I've had an idea about what if one of these people that your hero kills, what if just some henchman number 3, that gets killed along the way, with a butter knife or something, just like a nobody character in your book. What if the ramifications for just killing this one person turn into like a whole book? So the book I'm working on now, which is Gray Man 15, Court has killed somebody in the past who's just a henchman, but that guy's father turns out to be somebody very important. And that puts Court in crosshairs like he's never been before. And I just didn't have it all worked out, but I just had the idea, like as simple as what if something Court has done in his past comes back and bites him like that. And that was the inception of that idea of the story. And every book, there's something like that. There was a story in the news about some a drug cartel that murdered the family of a slain police officer because they showed up at his funeral. And I wrote this book called Ballistic, which was about Court trying to protect the family of a friend of his who was a Mexican federal police officer who was killed. And so it was just literally something in the news that just kind of stuck in the back of my head. And I was like, I wonder if I could do something with that. And you end up committing, a year of your life to working on it. So, it's important that you come up with something that you're very interested in, but at the same time, at the beginning, you really don't know where the story's going at all.
Hey everybody, I want to take a quick second to thank my friends at Phantom Products for believing in Make the Donuts, sponsoring this first season. They're powering us, and on top of that, they've powered some amazing lighting applications. Since 1943, they've been providing lighting to the military. They used to light the shipping lanes for military transports during World War II. They provided lights to the New York Police Department, the New York Fire Department, and first responders all over this country. They're family owned, they're American made. When I was in Afghanistan and Iraq, I was using this Phantom TLS, and it's an awesome light. It's got covert secure white, it's got cyan, it's got infrared, it's got these built-in flash patterns if you need it. In a roundabout way, without this light, there's some people in this world that probably wouldn't be here. So I want to thank Phantom Products again for believing in the show, for sponsoring us, and for the great stuff you guys make. Check out the website. We'll drop it down in the show notes. And again, Phantom Products, thanks for helping us make the donuts. How do you structure your books? Do you write an outline? Do you have a start? Do you have the story in mind? Do you have the character's arc throughout the story in mind and you want to hit certain points? How do you structure it? Because so many people struggle with how to get started. How do you order it?
Yeah, it's the toughest part. I mean, I always tell people, like, what people call writer's block is just not knowing. And it makes perfect sense to not know. If you write my books are long. If you write 150,000 word book, that's more than 150,000 decisions or things that you have to think up. There's a whole lot of things you have to think up. And so I do write a little bit of an outline, but it is very, very basic and it's very subject to change. And, like for my new book, I think what I told you there is probably as fleshed out as what I told my editor. It's like, it turns out that somebody that Court killed that didn't think about it a second, just basically a bad guy henchman was the son of somebody who turns out to be very influential. And And that's basically what I went with. And so I don't really have an outline like, and then they do this, and then they do that. Over the months, the first few months of doing research and thinking about it and laying there in bed, just staring at the ceiling and being very frustrated and going to Starbucks to work and then just coming home and going like, wow, I think I got dumber over the last 3 hours. And not only did I not write anything, it's just like I'm more confused by my own story. Then just little pieces will start to fall together. And I will make myself write, even if I don't know where I'm going. I'll have characters talk to each other, and I will sort of set up scenes that end up getting pulled out of the story. And I kind of know that like, I'm probably going to write 1,500 words here, and I might not use any of it, but it's going to help something jog, some idea. It's going to shake something loose. And so the book that I'm writing now has been like that. We are in June now, and I really started writing it in January, but I told my editor what it was going to be about probably last October. And, I'm 60,000 words in, and that's like barely more than a third. And we're in early June, and I will probably have it done in another 8 weeks, because now I'm seeing the pieces. If I had an outline that was like everything, I could do the book so fast, but they're just complicated to do these stories. I don't ever want them to be a template, where it feels like the same thing. It's like, oh, the beginning of the second act, there will be an action piece, and that's when, a love interest will pop in. I don't ever want the books to read like that or feel like that. So it does take me a while to come up with the answers, but it's just part of the process that you just slowly chip away, all the doubts and all the uncertainty about where your story is going.
Wow. So this is not formulaic. You have to be not just brutal with a co-author, but in your own work, you have to be brutal with yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I wish there was a formula. The one I did with a co-author was the most organized book that I've ever started, because we were both writing storylines that had to match up later in the story. And so that 91 chapter outline, if I could do that with every one of my books, I would. But I think we probably spent a year putting that together, and I don't have a year. I try to, I often write 2 books a year. And so this year I will turn a book in probably early August, and then I'll immediately start working on something else that won't be done by the end of the year, but it'll be done by the following spring. So, on that timeline, you always have to be thinking about the next thing.
So when you're writing a book like The Gray Man, you're surprising yourself as you write the book. Like, does your character surprise you in the direction it goes? I mean, you ever like, I didn't expect that was going to happen?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. Just today, I had a scene in my head that I've had it in my head for weeks, where the hero goes to talk to this guy who has this big home in the Cotswolds in England. And it was going to end up where you think the hero is going to kill this guy because he has every reason to. And in my head, he's going to get some piece of information, and then there was going to be some battle. It was just kind of turned into an action scene. And as I got deeper and deeper into the dialogue and these people were talking, I was like, there's kind of a way out for both of them here, where this character, who is definitely a villain, could be useful later in the story for me, and for the hero has a reason to keep him alive. So as I was writing this story, or this chapter, or it's probably 2 chapters, today, I was going like, oh, this guy may walk away from this, because it's starting to make more sense. And that's just come from the dialogue, because these 2 guys are sort of like arguing and negotiating with each other. And I was like, okay, no, I think it's going to, if I was the Gray Man, I would let this guy live, because he's actually more useful alive than dead. And the guys that could come in here and fight against him, the villain has a vested interest to not have them do that, and did not see that coming. And that will change. That will have like repercussions throughout the next 300 pages of this book in many different ways. And I'm glad that happened today, because otherwise, sometimes you're just writing and you're going like, how many times can I have these people, fight? I had a guy write me a letter once, and he's like, if your assassin's supposedly the best assassin in the world. He sure drops his gun a lot. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. But you try writing a 15-book series where he just pulls his gun out and shoots everybody, and nothing, there's no other things happen. It's like, let me see your 15-book series that you've kept the excitement going with the hero doing everything right all the time.
It is so entertaining watching sometimes you interact on the internet with your readers. Some of these people are just wacky, man. I'm like, where does this come from? And it's hilarious to watch you actually engage with them.
Yeah, and I don't do it as much as I used to, just because it's a huge time suck. Yeah, but I used to post like these, like the most horrific emails I would get. I would post them because I thought they were funny, and I would just get something out of it. But I stopped doing that because so many people think it's like me needing validation, like it's a cry for help. And I'm like, no, I just think it's funny that this person like basically got everything wrong that they said here. I had a guy going like, you think a handgun round can go faster than the speed of sound? You idiot, you know nothing, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I'm embarrassed for you right now, sir. But I don't post those that much anymore, just because I feel like 1 out of every 5 comments is somebody going like, hey, hang in there, just, forget the haters. And I'm like, no, the haters are forgotten. It's just funny. I'm just having fun with it.
Well, it helped me. I'm just a tiny little author, and I had a few people, give me grief about it. And I saw those little posts of yours, and I said, man, that's exactly how I'm going to approach this. I mean, look at this guy. He said I suck, and he's right. I'm terrible. I was like, check this out. This is the best insult I've ever heard. It's hilarious.
Yeah. No, they at Thriller Fest, which is a writers conference, in every summer in New York, they used to, I don't think they've done it in the past few years, they used to give away an award for the best bad review. And a friend of mine, John Gilstrap, you may know some of his writing. He's a great writer. He won 1 year, and I think he won for life. The review was that the glue boogers in the binding of the book were more valuable than any of the words written in the book, or something like that. And I was like, that's a great review. It's like, I love it. It's like, even if that person hates me, I would love to get a review like that.
Best question I've ever heard. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me shift gears, man. You're writing this long series of 15 books, The Gray Man. How do you manage the arc of the main character over 15 books? I mean, it's one thing over, the Sid Field 3-act structure or whatever, but you're talking about multiple, books. How do you do that?
Yeah, but it's my favorite part of the whole thing.
Really?
I kind of like thinking about how the psychology of this character would change over time, and how he would make friends and lose friends, and make alliances, and rugs pulled out from under him. I demand that every one of my books is a standalone novel. So if you picked up Gray Man 12, you don't have to have read the first 11 books, or Gray Man 15 or whatever. But at the same time, if you do read them all, there is this story arc, and there is this way that he develops, and these characters that he becomes close with, and these relationships with governments and things that it's interesting to me to work on it. And this one I'm working on now is all about family and legacy, and of course father is involved, and there's another character in there named Zach Hightower, who's another like main character, and his daughter is involved, and involved in different ways in the story, and they've just sort of been like hinted at and teased in other books, and I really kind of wanted to work them into this story because it makes sense for the story, not just so they can have some screen time, but that's kind of the fun part of it for me. Writing action scenes is great when you're doing it and you think of something that you haven't done before or you haven't seen before. That's fun to write that out and go like, well, this is probably somebody's thought of this. I'm not inventing things, but it's not it's not something that I saw in the last John Wick movie. That's fun, but I go into the action scenes without really mapping them out, and I just sort of like let them flow. But I really like to spend a lot of time thinking about the larger story arc for the characters and where they're going through book 16 and 17.
It's a catch-22. I had the opportunity in the 90s to work with one of maybe the greatest guitarists in the United States, and I won't name names, but I noticed that he always knew what he was going to play. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a catch-22 for you. You don't know where the story is going to take you, but you
Yeah.
know it when you know it. It's like a
Yeah.
great musician. They don't just guess and play patterns. They know which note they're going to play, and they're going to search
Yeah.
through all 12 until they get it. So
Yeah.
you just know it's like, oh, that's brilliant. That's perfect. That's what I want, right?
Yeah, for me, it's a hope. It's like I'm like I hope this resonates with readers. I never know until the book comes out, and there's always this huge sigh of relief as reviews start coming in and people like it. But my Decembers and Januaries, or I'll say Novembers and Decembers, before any reviews have come in, I've turned the book in. It's completely out of my hands. I can't fix it, can't change it. There's always this holding my breath going like, is this the one where I get found out where people think that you're terrible, and the book I'm writing now is different from the book I wrote last year, which was different than the book I wrote last year. So sooner or later, you're going to write something that is not going to resonate with people. But I've told myself a long time ago that okay, people like what you think up. So don't try and write for the fans, which is not a diss on the fans. It's just just dance with the one that brought you. And it's like you got here by making up these stories that made sense to you and that you wanted to read or know about. And so just keep doing that. And, there have been times in the series where I go, well, the readers are going to want him to do this, but it doesn't feel like what he would do because of his psychology and because of things that have happened to him in the past. And I'm like, I think you just have to let it go and say, okay, if people get mad at your hero, that's okay. That's part of a cool story, maybe. Yeah.
Well, the Gray Man's a hot property. I'm surprised that it was an option for a film a long time ago, although maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was. What was it like to find out that it got greenlit?
Well, it was initially optioned before it even came out in 2009, and nothing happened for the longest time. It actually got close to being made in 2012 with Brad Pitt, and then that fell apart, and then it bounced around. And then, it was in the summer of 2020. I had heard that Ryan Gosling was interested in it, but I had heard, Bradley Cooper 5 years before that, of course, Brad Pitt, and I'd heard just any name that you can imagine. So when they were like, "Oh, Gosling's reading it and he's really liking it," or whatever, I just roll my eyes because it's like, okay, Hollywood's given me a little money, and now they're going to just say something every year that's going to be different, and it meant nothing to me. And then I found out that it was greenlit the exact same time everybody else did. My agent called me and he said, "Have you checked your email?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Check it," and it was a link to a Deadline or one of the magazines.
It was in the magazine before you knew?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
come on.
And they told me that there were talks, and, they sounded positive, but it's Hollywood. So everybody's always talking about, things are about to happen that don't. And so I was really shocked. And I was at the premiere on Hollywood Boulevard, and somebody was interviewing me, and they're like, "Well, what's this like?" I'm like, I mean, I've been involved with this since 2007 when I wrote it. And I'm like, out of all the thousands of people here, I'm the one person going, what is going on right now? This just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't compute. It just feels like another Hollywood premiere to everybody else. But to me, that's wrote this at a Starbucks in Memphis, Tennessee at 5:30 in the morning before going to work. It's just it's so surreal.
That is great. Were you allowed to go on the set?
No, it was during the COVID time. It was, filmed in 21. And so there was all these COVID protocols. I never went to set. I met some of the actors, but not even all of them. I met mostly producers and directors. I'd met the directors a few years before. They had me come out to Hollywood, and Joe Russo wrote the first draft of the script. So the Russo brothers did it. And they had me come out to California and work with them for a few days as they were about to write the script. And so, I was involved in the early part of the story. And then other than I would get text messages from Joe Russo, now and then going things are going good. And they sent me a copy of the script as they were filming it. I really wasn't involved in the movie at all.
Wow, that's crazy. So let me ask you this. You've accomplished what most writers can only dream of. What kind of advice could you give to a young author right now who wants to follow in your footsteps?
Well, I would say the one piece of advice that I give, and I just have to expand on it every time I say it, finish things. So many people write portions of things and then they'll go write something else and they'll go write something else. Cause I have these conversations with people all the time. And to me, it means that they've hit some sort of roadblock with the one idea and now they're trying to do something else and they're trying to do something else. And it's all about getting over those speed bumps. Even if it doesn't feel like you can, that if you do, then you've just left 10,000 other wannabe writers behind, And so I feel like the tough thing about the job is persevering when it gets tough, because it's fun to write and to think, I've got this cool idea for a story. But then as you get deep into it and go like, how does this connective tissue work? How do I get from this point to this point? That's when people just sort of like, attention drifts into something else and go, well, maybe I'll write something about this. So I see that more than anything else with people that are coming to me early on for advice. So even if it's a short story or a novella or something, write a beginning, a middle, and an end, edit the crap out of it, and then write something completely different. And so it's just this game of doing it because you love it. And then on those moments when you're not loving it, just persevering and going like, I want this bad enough. Finding an agent, all that kind of stuff, it's really hard. Self-publishing is really, really hard because you have to like differentiate yourself from everybody else out there. All that stuff is tough. But if you have a really good quality manuscript or book or short story or whatever it is, if you have created that, if you've done that once and you can do that again, then you've done all you can do. After that, it's the stars have to sort of align for you. But if you love to do it and you don't mind, getting to the speed bumps and finding a way over them and just sticking to it, I think all you can do is all you can do, and you'll become a better writer and a better writer and a better writer.
Does Mark Greaney get writer's block?
Every single day.
How do you deal
with it?
Every
single day. Depending on how close I am to the deadline is how I deal with it. Like some days I shut my laptop and walk off. The best thing I can do is find another part of the story where I'm not stuck and work on that. So I don't write my book in a straight line at all. I mean, I have stuff written that may make it on page 500 of the book now, but I have stuff that's not written on page 200. And so that's the best way out of writer block, is to leave that part and go to another part. It can be difficult because in your head, you have this gaping hole and it's kind of hard to like see the later part of the story. But I mean, it's impossible to not have writer's block. Writer's block is just, I don't believe any author that says I go and I sit down and I write, 2 chapters a day, and then tomorrow I excitedly go back and write the next 2 chapters, and I do that every day until the book is done, and then I give you a big thumbs up and the book comes out. And it's like, it's possible, but that sounds like magic to me. Like my book is just all these like, misty, confusing things swirling around in my head that I've got to somehow get down on my computer in an organized fashion. And so there are days where just nothing comes. And then there are days where your fingers can't move fast enough. So you just have to kind of manage that and just keep at it.
Like Clancy, I feel like you look in the future. I feel like maybe it's because of your dad's journalism background and the fact that you're a news junkie, but I feel like great thriller, mystery, military type authors are always looking into the future. And we know the Chaos Age is fantastic. How has drone warfare and AI changed what you do, the stories you tell, and where do you think is going to happen in the future?
Well, when I was researching that 2 years ago now, it was moving so fast as I was researching it. And it has moved faster by leaps and bounds. And just some of the research that I saw was that the computing power that was going into AI had increased. I can't remember the number now, but it was something like 10.9 billion% since 2010 or in 12 years or something. And the resources going into it and the advancements, the things that people said would happen in the next 50 years that all said has all turned in the next 3 years, so it's scary. I could do every one of my next books about AI and the threats of AI and the sort of the tech bros who are going like, yeah, I'm building like a walled off lead bunker for myself and my family, but I'm still throwing all my money and I'm getting money out of a Saudi sovereign wealth fund to advance my AI dreams. But at the same time, this thing, 60% chance this thing may wipe us all off the face of the earth. I mean, it's really scary. And it's kind of like Russia. I did a couple of books where Russia was an antagonist. And I thought, well, I can't do more books with Russia as the antagonist. But then I thought, gosh, I don't think Tom Clancy was worried about that in the 1980s.
No,
because that was what was in the news, and that was the Soviet Union, and that was the big thing going on. And there's obviously a lot going on with Russia now. So I've taken that. My new book has nothing to do with Russia, but I went from having this hard and fast rule. It's like, well, you don't want to keep going back over the same ground. Well, it wouldn't be the same ground. It would be something different. And it's the same thing with AI. I would do more stuff with that because that is something that's just growing and growing. As the way it affects me as a writer, the large language models have stolen every piece of printed material online and are using it for its own devices. But I'm not worried in the short term about Chat GPT writing my next book or anything like that. I've never gotten any use out of it so far, but it's still in its infancy. So there will come a time where I guess that will be a problem.
That's a good point. I mean, you're thinking about authors and writers right now being plagiarized by a computer. How do you defend against that? I guess there really is no way but just to be original. I don't think AI will ever take that spark.
Yeah, I mean, you can go on ChatGPT and say, write a 2,000 word story in the style of Mark Greaney about X, Y, and Z, and it will churn something out. And I've done that before because some people told me. And then I look at it and I go like, oh, that's kind of clever. And I go like, oh, that makes no sense. And it's like, oh yeah, I saw that in the movie of the week. And then 1983. So, but again, it's a technology that's still in its maybe it's adolescence, and it's going to keep on going. So who knows?
Geopolitically, what are the three things that keep you up at night? What are the three scenarios or situations in this world today that scare you?
China going after Taiwan because they feel like there's really not enough of a downside with the West. That is very scary, and I think very potentially could happen. I worry about just the division in the United States. It's very sad and it's very scary. And, no matter which side you fall on, I always think like at our worst, Americans agree with one another on 85% of the things. But I think we could all kill each other over the 14% or whatever we don't, or you just see that. And you've seen the dissolution of just decorum and how sort of social media and the kind of the outrage merchants that are out there that make their living off of, making everybody think that the other guy's going to kill them tomorrow. I think that's a huge, huge thing. And I'm truly concerned about the West's response to Russia and Russia's expansion. And for one of the reasons is because of China and Taiwan. They're watching that and going like, wow, first we weren't giving you, we said we weren't going to give Ukraine the defensive missiles. Now we're saying we might not even sell them to them. Things like that. It's like, I think China goes like, gosh, there are rail networks from the West into Ukraine and they're not getting what they need. Taiwan, we pretty much have it surrounded. Yeah. The West can't even get to it. Right. Like what's stopping us and the repercussions of that. So, I mean, there's a lot of geopolitical issues in the world, but those would be the things that would keep me up at night.
Do you see almost like a second red metal developing in the Pacific? Because I have a good friend of mine who worked at Pac Command, and she's talking about the long-range air assault aircraft. I'm a Black Hawk guy at heart, and then they replaced it with this, this tilt rotor design. And I think the impetus for this is truly to get around the islands, the island hop, to project that power throughout the Pacific. So you can see a change in acquisitions in the military gearing up more towards a Pacific type, conflict. Do you think that's a possibility outside of just Taiwan?
Yeah, and that's actually the plot of Red Metal too. That we're working on, and my co-author Rip has been to Japan. He was actually stationed in Okinawa, and so he's very sort of focused on that and interested in that. I've been to China; it's been some time, but I mean, I think I do think we are aware of it, the danger of it, but I mean, I think logistically, it's a tough nut to crack, right? And on top of that, I think sort of the one thing that would keep China from doing it is just feeling like the headache that it would cause with their trade and their diplomacy vis-a-vis the rest of the world would be so damaged. And now I think they're seeing how we're sort of not supporting Ukraine, and I think they must be going, Taiwan's going to be a piece of cake. So that worries me quite a bit.
What are the 3 best books that you've ever read?
That I've ever read?
Yes.
Well, one of them, I don't know when you'll have this on, but today is the day, it's very sadly, that Frederick Forsyth passed away at 86 years old. And I think that's right. And he was one of the greatest thriller writers ever, but he wrote a book called The Devil's Alternative in 1979, a very Soviet Union, Cold War type novel. But the twists and turns in that, as a reader, you find out you're kind of rooting for the wrong side. There are all these like little things in that book that I think just are fantastic. I'd have to say a Clancy book. I've been asked so many times what my favorite Clancy novel is, and I have different answers at different times. But I think maybe Clear and Present Dangers is my favorite. It's a great novel. And then there's this guy, Ralph Peters, who I mentioned earlier. He wrote a book called The War in 2020, and it came out in like 1991, I think. And it's not how things looked in 2020, although there were tilt rotor aircraft at the center of it. But it was an amazing narrative story. So I could list 50 books. Nelson DeMille is so good. And I mean, even like Dean Koontz and Stephen King, and just great books. But those 3 come to mind. I usually give some version of that, even though the Clancy books bounce around. Sometimes I'll say Red October. Sometimes I'll say Cardinal of the Kremlin. Sometimes I'll say Clear and Present Danger. Who
is the one author right now that you think isn't getting enough attention and is just brilliant?
Meg Gardner is fantastic. She's a great author, and she wrote this book Heat 2, which is the Michael Mann. They're going to make a film out of it. I'm sure you've seen the movie Heat. Mm-hmm. It came out in 95. Oh, yeah. That book Heat 2 is really, really, really good, and she's just a terrific author. I think when that movie comes out, she's not going to be somebody that nobody's reading. I think that'll be huge. That's like a book that I've read in the past, 2 years, to where I just go like, I'll just stop everything and just read this book.
Do you read a lot still while you're working? I mean, do you use literature or nonfiction, and you're still reading? Do you have time?
I don't have the time that I like, and I have to read for blurbs a lot. So you're reading a book that's coming out, so you can, tell people what you think of it, and they'll put your name on the cover with, this book, what I thought of it. And so there's always a couple of those in my to read pile. There's a few authors that, I'm super excited when their stuff comes out, and I definitely look at it. And Andrews and Wilson have done some really good stuff recently, Mike Woodard. So I don't read a 20th as much as I'd like to, but I do when I can, for sure.
Awesome. Well, listen, Mark, it's been great to have you on the show. If you have not read the Gray Man series, you need to get into it. You need to really get into his entire volume of work. But I know a lot of your fans are going to be waiting for that book. You said it's going to come out later this year?
It comes out next February. Yeah.
Next February. Because they're going to wait through the holidays. Okay. And you have to wait through the holidays as well, because they're going to turn in and wonder, is this going to be the one where you get found out, right?
Exactly. It's always like that.
I'm sure there's going to find out that you've got immense talent. Mark, thanks you so much for being on the show. And, thank you as many years ago for taking a few minutes out of the day, or really a couple hours, and talking to me. I'm sorry I couldn't write that book. Some of us are writers. Some of us can hear the music, and some of us just like to play. But I really appreciate you coming to the show.
It's great to see you, Erik.